And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, President-elect Donald Trump beats down the abusively biased alt-radical left mainstream media. Now, Trump's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, will join us in a few minutes. But first, the president-elect is now fighting back against the press that openly colluded with the Clinton campaign and that tried to undermine his candidacy every single step of the way. Now, earlier today, he met with the New York Times. We'll have more on that in just a second. But first, yesterday at Trump Tower, network executives and anchors from CNN, MSNBC, NBC News, ABC News, CBS News, and Fox News attended a meeting meant to reset relations with the president-elect. Now, Fox News executives were in attendance, but they wouldn't comment since it was an off-the-record briefing. However, according to the New York Post, Donald Trump used the opportunity to call out many members of this dishonest press. Now, Trump reportedly told them all, quote, "We're in a room full of liars, the deceitful, dishonest media who got it all wrong." And Trump even took direct aim at CNN President Jeff Zucker, saying that everyone at the network were liars and that Zucker should be ashamed of himself. Now, the president-elect didn't stop there. He reportedly hit NBC News for their coverage of his campaign, and Trump slammed ABC News' Martha Raddatz, who was at the meeting for almost crying during election night coverage. You may remember this.
Tim Kaine has a son in the Marine Corps. He was asked by John Dickerson, so if Donald Trump is democratically elected and your son is serving as a Marine, you wouldn't trust his life under that commander-in-chief? And Kaine said, I wouldn't. That's a pretty extraordinary thing to say if you have a son in the Marine Corps and that you don't trust the commander-in-chief. The people in the military defend the Constitution.
Oh, now I'm so sure some in the room had their little feelings hurt, but really, who cares? Didn't they deserve every bit of what Trump said to them? Now, keep in mind, some of these so-called unbiased journalists, they laughed off Donald Trump and said he never stood a chance years before he even decided to run for president. And they each had to eat their words. Watch this.
Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
Do it. Do it. Look at me. Do it. I will personally write you a campaign check now on behalf of this country, which does not want you to be president, but which badly wants you to run.
This man has got some momentum, and we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket next.
I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on. Sorry to laugh.
Which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones right now, Donald Trump.
Mr. Trump, to answer your call for political honesty, I just want to say you're not going to be president, all right? It's been fun.
President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. At real Donald Trump. At least I will go down as a president.
I think this is going to be really the beginning of the end of Donald Trump.
It is likely to be the beginning of the end of Donald Trump sitting atop the GOP field.
You wrote that this is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump. There's just no way to win if you over half the population doesn't support you.
Talk about the biggest loser. Isn't that a show on NBC? He could end up being the biggest loser.
There's a possibility, Nancy, that he could win.
No, he's not going to win.
It's impossible.
He's not going to win. He is not going to win. Don't worry about that.
Hillary Clinton only 2 away from 270 electoral votes. Let's say the Clinton campaign is feeling fantastic about Nevada. Let's give her that for a moment. You heard Jeff Zeleny say they're feeling really good about Florida.
This is where we stood coming into the night, 268 to 204, so clearly an advantage for Secretary Clinton.
Donald Trump has won the state of Arkansas. Fox can also project that Donald Trump will win the states of Kansas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, and Wyoming. And we are about to make a major call. Fox News Decision Desk is now projecting that Donald Trump has won the state of North Carolina, projecting that Donald Trump will win the state of Utah.
A victory for Donald Trump in Ohio can be called by the Fox News Decision Desk at this point. Iowa will go to Donald Trump.
Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin.
Donald Trump will win the state of Florida. The Fox News Decision Desk has called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump This means that Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States.
Amazing how wrong so many were. Also, earlier today, President-elect Trump, he met with the New York Times. Now, I'm sure they were trying to smooth things over with Mr. Trump. And, of course, after their unrelenting negative coverage of his campaign. Now, Mr. Trump should keep in mind that a few days before this meeting, that paper praised former Obama advisor, now a CNN contributor, Van Jones, as a, quote, star of the 2016 campaign. By the way, the same Van Jones who was a member of the alt-radical left and who viciously attacked Donald Trump on a consistent basis. Here are just some of the things that were said about the president-elect on CNN with Van Jones.
A white lash. This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president in part. And that's the part where the pain comes. And Donald Trump has a responsibility tonight to come out and reassure people that he is going to be the president of all the people who he insulted and offended and brushed aside.
If there's one thing that Donald Trump could do now that might calm some people, we're on track for a tragedy.
No, this is a really sad night. I'm just going to say it. This is a very sad night for the country. You can't polish this turd. He doesn't talk about George Washington. He doesn't talk about Ronald Reagan the way he talked about Putin and Assad. This man has demonstrated an appalling lack of patriotism, and you should be ashamed to sit up here and defend it.
He was describing some Mad Max America. I work in some of the toughest neighborhoods and some of the toughest communities in this country, and I don't know what he's talking about. I've never felt this way in my life. I have read in history, being in moments where there's some big authoritarian movement and some leader that's rising up. And I felt that way tonight.
Now, all of this gets to my larger point tonight. Now, in 2008, if you remember, I said journalism was dead, and this election now shows it was far worse than any of us ever thought. Now, WikiLeaks, they exposed rampant collusion between the media and, of course, Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. We now know that interim DNC chair Donna Brazile from the Clinton campaign gave them multiple debate questions. That's called cheating. CNN was soliciting the DNC for questions that they should ask Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Carly Fiorina during their interviews. Reporters asked the Clinton campaign for approval before publishing their stories. So-called journalists allowed the Clinton campaign to edit quotes. Over at CNBC, John Harwood was offering the campaign advice and bragged about going after Trump in a debate that he was moderating. And worst of all, WikiLeaks exposed how dozens of journalists from every major news organization, except the Fox News Channel, were invited to be wined and dined at Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta's house. Donald Trump should keep all of that in mind. The media already had its chance to cover Donald Trump fairly and honestly. They blew it. And in my opinion, it's time to reevaluate the press in this country, and maybe it's time to change the traditional relationship that the press will have with the White House. Now, in this day and age of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, does Trump really need to be granting access to biased journalists that openly oppose him? Just look at the video the president-elect released yesterday. It was detailing actions that he will take on key issues during his first 100 days in office. Now, Trump can do this and speak directly to you, the American people, without having his words twisted and taken out of context. Why not do that? So until members of the media come clean about colluding with the Clinton campaign and admit that they knowingly broke every ethical standard that they're supposed to stand and uphold, they should not have the privilege. They should not have the responsibility of covering the president on behalf of you, the American people.